Ever noticed that some people in their 70s don't actually look younger, and yet they somehow feel younger? It's hard to explain. You see them walking through a park, sharing a quiet laugh with a friend, or simply sitting with a cup of tea. Nothing about them seems extraordinary, but somehow they carry a kind of lightness that many people lose decades earlier. It isn't flawless skin. It isn't expensive skincare. And it certainly isn't an endless search for the next anti-aging miracle. It's something much quieter than that. Something you can sense long before you notice a single wrinkle. Maybe we've been asking the wrong question all along. Instead of asking, how do I look younger? Maybe we should be asking, what makes a person feel young, even as they grow older? Because youth was never only about appearance. It's in the way someone stands, the ease in their movements, the warmth in their smile, the curiosity still shining in their eyes, the calm confidence they bring into an ordinary conversation. It's the feeling that life still has something left to offer, and they're still excited to receive it. I've met people in their 30s who already looked exhausted by life, and I've met people in their 70s whose eyes still carried the quiet excitement of someone looking forward to tomorrow. That kind of youth can't be purchased. It doesn't come from a bottle, and it rarely arrives through dramatic change. It is built one ordinary decision at a time, one meal, one walk, one conversation, one peaceful evening, repeated quietly over years, until those small moments become the person you are. What if aging doesn't suddenly happen because another birthday arrives? What if it quietly accumulates through thousands of invisible choices? The food we eat, the stress we hold on to, the sleep we sacrifice, the people we surround ourselves with, and the habits we repeat without even noticing? In Japan, many of those choices have become quiet traditions. Nothing dramatic, nothing complicated, just small habits practiced so consistently that over time, they shape not only how people age, but how alive they continue to feel. Today, let's explore 8 Japanese habits that may help you protect something even more valuable than looking younger: the quiet vitality that makes a person seem timeless. Habit 1. Stop eating before you're full. One of Japan's best-known longevity habits isn't about eating exotic foods or following a complicated diet. It's about knowing when to stop. In Okinawa, one of the world's longest-living communities, many people have practiced a simple idea for generations. It's called Hara Hachi Bu. It means eating until you're about 80% full, instead of eating until you can't take another bite. At first, that may not sound like much. After all, what difference could a few extra bites really make? But think about how you feel after a meal that's just a little too big. Your body feels heavier, your mind slows down, sometimes your face even looks a little puffier the next morning. Now imagine avoiding that feeling almost every single day for decades. Over time, those small decisions quietly add up. Your body spends less energy dealing with constant overeating and more time doing what it was designed to do: repair, recover, and maintain itself. But here's the question most people ask: how do I know when I'm 80% full? The truth is, your body usually knows long before your plate is empty. The problem is, most of us eat faster than our bodies can speak. One simple habit can change that. Slow down. Put your fork or your chopsticks down between a few bites. Take a breath. Let your meal catch up with your stomach. Instead of asking, "Am I completely full?" try asking, "Am I still hungry?" There's an important difference. Hara Hachi Bu doesn't ask you to leave the table feeling deprived. It asks you to leave the table feeling comfortable, satisfied, not stuffed. This isn't about dieting. It isn't about counting calories, and it certainly isn't about starving yourself. It's about learning to trust the signals your body has been sending you all along. Because for many of us, fullness doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives quietly, if we give it enough time to be heard. And perhaps, looking younger doesn't begin with finding more food to eat. Sometimes, it begins with knowing when enough is enough. Because what nourishes your body must also be carried by your body. And that's exactly where the next Japanese habit begins. Habit 2. Keep your body in motion. The second habit isn't about becoming a runner, or joining a gym, or chasing the perfect workout routine. It's much simpler than that. The Japanese have long understood something that modern life often makes us forget. Our bodies were designed to move, not just once a day, but throughout the day. There's an important difference between exercise and simply living an active life. Exercise is something you schedule. Movement becomes part of who you are. You can spend an hour at the gym every evening and still spend the other 10 hours sitting, behind a desk, in a car, on the couch. That 1 hour is certainly better than nothing, but it doesn't completely erase the effects of staying still for the rest of the day. That's why, in many traditional Japanese neighborhoods, movement isn't treated as a separate task. People walk to the local market, ride bicycles for short trips, take the stairs without thinking twice, work in small gardens, carry groceries home by hand. These aren't workouts. They're simply part of everyday life. And over the years, those ordinary movements quietly become extraordinary investments in health. They keep the muscles working, the joints flexible, the balance sharp, the circulation steady, without demanding constant motivation. Here's something you can try tomorrow. Leave your headphones at home. Go for a short walk, even if it's only 10 minutes. Instead of filling every quiet moment with noise, pay attention. Notice the breeze on your face, the sunlight filtering through the trees, the sound of birds you normally ignore, the smell of fresh coffee from a nearby cafe. Watch people passing by, not to judge them, simply to notice them. You'll discover that walking isn't only movement for your body, it's often rest for your mind. Sometimes the greatest benefit of walking isn't where it takes you, it's where it brings your attention. Movement has a remarkable way of changing the body, but learning how to slow down changes something even deeper, your nervous system. And that's exactly where the next Japanese habit begins. Habit 3, turn tea into a moment of peace. If you ask most people why green tea is healthy, they'll probably mention antioxidants, and they're not wrong. Green tea does contain natural compounds that may support overall health. But I don't think that's the most interesting part. The real lesson isn't what's in the cup. It's what the cup asks you to do. Slow down. In many parts of Japan, making tea has never been just about drinking tea. It's a small ritual, a quiet pause, a gentle reminder that not every moment has to be rushed. Think about how many times we move from one task to the next without ever stopping. We answer one email, then immediately check another. We finish one meeting and reach for our phones before we've even stood up. Our bodies may leave one moment behind, but our minds rarely do. Stress simply follows us from one part of the day to the next. A simple cup of tea can interrupt that pattern. It creates a transition between work and rest, between rushing and breathing, between reacting to the world and becoming aware of yourself again. For a few quiet minutes, there's nothing to solve, nothing to prove, nowhere to be, just warm hands, a slow breath, and the simple act of being present. And perhaps that's where much of the benefit really comes from, not only from what you're drinking, but from the permission to pause. Because sometimes our bodies don't need more stimulation. They need more moments of stillness. You don't even have to drink green tea for this habit to matter. A cup of herbal tea, coffee, or even warm water. The drink itself is only the invitation. The ritual is the real medicine. But even the calmest cup of tea cannot erase the stress you've been carrying for years. Especially the stress your face has quietly learned to hold. And that's where the next Japanese habit begins. Habit 4. Let your face learn to rest. When we think about aging, we usually think about time. We blame birthdays, sunlight, or genetics. But there's another influence that's much quieter, one we rarely notice. Stress leaves marks too. Not all wrinkles are simply the result of getting older. Some are the result of repeating the same expressions thousands of times. The forehead that tightens every time you're worried, the jaw that clenches through another stressful meeting, the shoulders that slowly creep upward without you even realizing it. Day after day, year after year, eventually, your body begins to treat tension as its normal resting position. Let's try something together. Right now, don't change anything. Just notice. Is your jaw clenched? Are your shoulders slightly raised? Is there tension across your forehead or around your eyes? Take a slow breath. Now gently let those muscles soften. You probably didn't even realize they were working. That's the strange thing about chronic stress. After a while, it stops feeling like stress. It simply starts feeling normal. In Japan, there is a deep appreciation for calmness, not only as an emotion, but as something the body can practice. Small, daily rituals, quiet moments, and gentle awareness help interrupt the habit of carrying unnecessary tension because your face is always listening to what your nervous system repeats. Over time, your face remembers what your nervous system practices. And perhaps the most youthful face isn't the one with the fewest wrinkles. It's the one that no longer feels the need to brace itself against the world. Japanese wisdom doesn't only pay attention to what enters the body. It also pays close attention to the environment surrounding the body. And that brings us to the next habit. Habit 5. Eat with the seasons. One of the quietest Japanese habits is also one of the easiest to overlook. It's simply eating what the season naturally provides. At first, that doesn't sound very remarkable. After all, most grocery stores let us buy almost anything at any time of the year. Strawberries in winter, pumpkins in spring, tomatoes in every season. We've become so used to having everything that we've almost forgotten what it means to look forward to something. In Japan, seasonal eating isn't only about nutrition. It's about paying attention. Each season brings its own colors, its own flavors, its own traditions. Even the bowls, the plates, and the way a meal is presented often change with the time of year. A spring meal feels different from an autumn meal, not because the recipe is better, but because it reflects what's happening outside the window. In many ways, the table becomes a quiet calendar. You don't just notice the seasons, you taste them, you celebrate them. And without realizing it, you stay connected to the natural rhythm of life. That rhythm matters more than we often think. Seasonal foods are usually fresher, often harvested closer to the time they're eaten, which naturally brings greater variety to your diet throughout the year. Instead of eating the same handful of foods every week, your body receives different nutrients, different colors, and different flavors as nature changes. But perhaps the greatest benefit isn't nutritional at all, it's psychological. Seasonal eating teaches patience, gratitude, and the simple joy of appreciating something because it won't last forever. There's something deeply calming about allowing nature, instead of convenience, to shape part of your daily life. Because health isn't only built by what we eat, it's also shaped by the rhythm in which we live. Food nourishes the body, but real healing continues long after dinner is over, because while food restores, sleep is where the body quietly begins to repair itself. Habit 6. Prepare for sleep before you need it. When we think about sleep, most of us focus on one question: how many hours did I get? But perhaps there's a better question. What kind of evening did I give my body? Because sleep doesn't really begin the moment your head touches the pillow. It begins long before that. In many ways, your last hour of the day becomes the first hour of your sleep. Your body is always paying attention. The bright light from a screen, a stressful conversation, a heavy late-night meal, one more email, one more news headline, one more reason to stay mentally awake. Then we climb into bed, expecting our minds to suddenly become quiet. But the nervous system doesn't work like a light switch. It responds to patterns, to rhythm, to repeated signals. In Japan, evening routines often carry a sense of gentleness. A warm bath, a simple meal, soft lighting, a cup of tea, a few quiet moments before bed. None of these habits are magical on their own, but together, they send the body a clear message. The day is ending, you are safe, it's time to let go. And perhaps that's one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves, not just more sleep, but a peaceful arrival into sleep. Because the body does some of its most remarkable work while we're resting. Muscles recover, cells repair. The brain quietly organizes memories from the day. Even our emotions begin to settle. Morning doesn't simply begin when the alarm rings. It begins the night before, and the quality of tomorrow is often decided by how gently we end today. But even the deepest sleep can't replace something every human being still needs: a sense of belonging. Because while sleep helps the body recover, it's meaningful human connection that helps the heart recover. And that's where the next Japanese habit begins. Habit 7. Never grow old alone. If there's one lesson that appears again and again in places where people live long lives, it's this: longevity is rarely a solo achievement. We often think of health as something deeply personal: the food we eat, the exercise we choose, the hours we sleep. But human beings were never designed to thrive alone. In Okinawa, one tradition has quietly reflected this idea for generations. It's called moai. A moai is a small circle of people who continue showing up for one another throughout life. Sometimes they meet for tea, sometimes they share meals, sometimes they simply check in to make sure everyone is doing okay. It's not a social club, it isn't networking, and it certainly isn't about collecting as many friends as possible, because belonging is very different from popularity. You can have thousands of followers and still feel completely alone. Or You can have just 2 or 3 people who truly know your story and feel deeply connected. The number isn't what matters. The feeling is. Knowing that someone notices when you disappear, someone celebrates your victories, someone sits beside you when life becomes difficult, that quiet sense of belonging may nourish us just as much as healthy food ever could. And then there's another Japanese idea that's often misunderstood: Ikigai. People usually translate it as your life's purpose. But for many people, it's much smaller than that, and perhaps much more beautiful. Ikigai can simply be having something that makes tomorrow worth waking up for. A grandchild who runs into your arms, a garden waiting to be watered, a morning walk with a friend, a favorite cafe, a book you haven't finished yet. Something small, something ordinary, something that gently whispers, tomorrow is worth showing up for. Perhaps that's one of the greatest secrets to aging well. Not living for one enormous purpose, but finding quiet meaning in ordinary days. Because eventually, healthy habits aren't defeated by a lack of knowledge. They're defeated by something much simpler: inconsistency. And that's exactly where the final Japanese habit begins. Habit 8. Choose consistency over perfection. If all 8 of these habits have one thing in common, it's this: none of them depend on extraordinary discipline. They depend on ordinary repetition. We often wait for motivation before we change our lives. We tell ourselves, I'll start next Monday, when work slows down, when I have more energy. But motivation is a feeling, and feelings come and go. The people who age gracefully usually aren't the most motivated people in the room. They've simply built routines that don't require constant motivation. Because real change doesn't happen through intensity, it happens through repetition. One small choice, made often enough, eventually becomes part of who you are. If you'd like to borrow one lesson from the Japanese approach to habits, remember these 3 simple rules. First, start smaller than you think you need to. Don't promise yourself an hour-long walk. Start with 10 minutes. Don't decide to completely change your diet overnight. Begin with one healthier meal each day. Small habits are much easier to repeat. And repeated actions are what create lasting change. Second, attach the new habit to something you already do. Drink a glass of water after brushing your teeth. Take a short walk after dinner. Stretch while your morning coffee is brewing. The less you rely on memory, the more you can rely on routine. And finally, never miss twice. Everyone has difficult days. Everyone gets busy. Missing once is part of being human. Missing twice is how a new habit quietly disappears. So if you skip today, simply begin again tomorrow. No guilt, no punishment, just return again and again. Because consistency isn't about never falling off track. It's about becoming the kind of person who always finds the way back. Perhaps that's the quiet wisdom hidden behind so many Japanese traditions. They don't ask for perfection. They simply ask you to return. One meal, one walk, one conversation, one peaceful evening, one ordinary day at a time. And maybe that's the real secret to staying young, not trying to become a completely different person overnight, but becoming just a little healthier, a little calmer, and a little kinder to yourself every single day. Before we finish, it's worth saying one important thing. Japan isn't perfect, and not every Japanese person lives this way. No culture does. These habits aren't rules. They're not magical secrets, and they're certainly not reasons to place one country above another. They're simply cultural principles that have helped many people build healthier rhythms over time. Not myths to worship, but ideas worth learning from. Because wisdom isn't about copying another culture. It's about recognizing timeless human behaviors wherever they happen to appear. When we began, we asked a simple question. Why do some people seem to grow older without seeming to grow old? Perhaps the answer was never about looking younger. Perhaps it's about protecting something far more valuable. Your vitality, your curiosity, your sense of calm, your ability to enjoy ordinary moments. The people who age most gracefully may not be trying to stay young at all. They're simply refusing, day after day, to practice the small habits that quietly make people old. One mindful meal, one peaceful walk, one good night's sleep, one meaningful conversation, one ordinary choice, repeated often enough until it becomes a way of living. And perhaps that's what aging well has always meant. Not fighting time, but living each day in a way that gives time less to take away. For the next 7 days, don't try all 8 habits. Choose just one. Practice it. Live with it. Notice what changes. Then come back and tell us what happened. Not what changed in your mirror, but what changed in your life. If this conversation gave you a new way to think about growing older, consider sharing it with someone you care about, because sometimes the smallest habit can become the beginning of a very different life.